it's one of those moments where I'm like, I don't even know what to banter about. Well, I do actually. So I went home, as we were talking about last week. I went home for a couple of days to visit my folks, which was really nice, and
Okay.
did a lot of reading. I read 2 books last week, which is yeah,
So many books.
so many books, and they were
That's
not
like
easy books. Well,
double the amount of one book.
yeah, I was reading Duluback's Catholicism, which I would definitely love to
Yeah.
do a podcast on one day, uh, but not right now. I still need to let it kind of. And then I was reading Heidegger's Intro to Metaphysics. If you want to torture yourself, read
Read some
Heidegger.
Heidegger. Can I tell you my Heidegger story real quick? I think I've
Absolutely.
mentioned this before on the Twitterverse, but for others. So I had a seminarian buddy of mine who was super into Heidegger, and he was like, Anthony, this is college seminary, by the way. You have to take this class. So it's a master's level class. I had the credit, so I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. The worst class I've ever taken, but not without some entertainment. So they get all these grad students, right? And grad philosophy students are just the worst because they're doing philosophy for the most philosophical reasons. They're doing philosophy because for philosophy's sake, which makes them the most irritating kinds of
Yeah.
people. Like
And
in a
they got the
philosophy
soul
group.
patch,
Oh,
unironically,
the
and
hats and everything.
or their embodied nihilism, or
Here's the thing: there are three kinds of people in a philosophy course. There's law students who are normal because they're just taking a class and they're trying to get stuff that it's for a purpose. Good, good, good. You've got seminarians, hit or miss, hit or miss. Let's be honest, but they're
yep.
usually trying to just get the information right. And you've got these philosophy peoples, and they're the most irritating. God bless them. I hope they're doing good work. But our professor, he would wear a different wolf T-shirt every day.
Huh.
Every day, a different wolf T-shirt. Like there were several wolves. Like there's moon in the background. Amazing. And
Kind of
he
like
had
that van art.
was that
Kind of like that old van art from the 70s
yes,
type of thing. Yeah.
exactly that.
Yeah.
Exactly that. He was tenured, so he's like, I don't care. I like wolves, and like had the most majestic of neck beards. It was all in the neck, the entire beard. It was amazing,
Interesting.
and you knew he had some sort of faculty meeting if he put a sports coat over the wolf T-shirt. So I took this class. I never had any idea what was going on.
Yeah.
I wrote some sort of paper on being or Dasein and friendship, and I got a B plus somehow out of it.
Yeah.
And like I don't know, I wrote 20 pages. I don't know what it meant, but I did it. So
There you
that's
go.
whenever I think of Heidegger, I have
There you
flashbacks to
go.
that experience. Sorry,
Uh,
but go ahead. Yeah.
no. This is good. So I'll now share. I was one of those. I went through many programs in university in my undergrad, but I ended up in philosophy in the end.
Yeah. No
Um,
one's surprised.
but when I started off in computer science,
Right.
right? And I enjoyed philosophy, which was really cool and everything, but I didn't take it because I was going to be a priest at the time. At least not at the time. I enjoyed it, but I was also never thought about a career in philosophy either. But we had this one professor. I think he was in a chair position for a couple of years, so he was a visiting professor. He was our Aristotle professor, Taneli Kukkonen, Finnish guy, who always he had like a long blonde ponytail. He had glasses. He always wore cutoff shirts, and he was decently fit. And he had a variety of shoes that always had like crosses on them. Yeah, he was a unique individual, and he would just stand up there and he'd hold his Aristotle without ever actually even looking at it.
Yeah.
And he would be able to tell you what's going on in the book and everything like that. He was very impressive. I barely remember anything I took in that class, but I just remember being impressed by him as a philosophy professor. He's one. You're always going to get one of those unique philosophy professors when you're in undergrad, and he always said I think he goes, I'm definitely one of the top 5 Aristotelians in the world. So he's very sure of himself.
Yes, there was another professor I had. He did Aristotle. I think he wrote a book on De Anima, which not a lot of people have. And he would always talk about how all the other Aristotle professors are actually wrong, and he's right about everything. So maybe it's an Aristotle professor thing. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah. Who knows? So, but yeah, no. I was reading that last thing. So it was nice. It was a little kind of. I just like I remember one day though I sat there and I read 170 pages.
Woo!
I've never done that before.
It's amazing.
I've never done that before. It was quite beautiful. So, actually, I don't really have anything else to say. I think those philosophy stories was nice on my part. So,
Good.
yeah. So, welcome to Clerically Speaking. I'm Father Harrison.
I'm Father Anthony, and I went to the doctor today for the first
Congratulations.
time in 7 years.
Did you get the COVID?
No, so
Okay.
actually, so it was back when I did a wedding. I was trying to find the quickest way to get a COVID test, and so I was like, oh, I'll call the family practice that I used to go to, and they said they don't do COVID tests. I was like, you know what? It's been a while since I've gotten a checkup. Let's schedule one. And she said, the very nice secretary lady was like, when's the last time? I'm like, I don't know. I think it's been a few years. And she looked me up on the database and she said, it's been 7 years actually. So you need a whole new intake thing. I didn't count as a patient anymore, even though they had my
Mhm.
records. So today I went, and buddy, I got my money's worth. First of all, because my diocese has excellent health insurance for its priests.
Wait, but why do you need to worry about that? Don't you
Because
just go
I
to the
live in
doctor?
America. I
Don't you just
know.
go to the doctor and not have to worry about getting a bill?
No, that's not how that works
Oh,
here. But
really? Huh. Strange.
I appreciate the people of God who have made it, health insurance available to me, and it's very good. Okay.
Yes.
Seriously, I actually do mean that because
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
amazing. So I got my money's worth for sure, though. I got a tetanus booster in one
Mhm,
shoulder. I got my flu shot in my other shoulder. I
mhm.
got some new stomach medication because I've got the heartburn and a lot agita down there, so I got new drugs for that. I got some anxiety medication. Very
Mm.
excited for that. I'm sick of being so anxious all the time that I can't function. So hopefully this will be helpful. I'm getting blood work done. I'm also getting my stomach scoped
Oh,
so they
wow.
can see what's wrong with my stomach because of all the stomach problems. And it was wonderful.
Nice.
Doctor, nice lady, nurse, nice lady, all very helpful,
Yeah.
answering all my questions and stuff. And yeah, it
Isn't
was
it great growing up that you need to start getting like blood work done just to see what's up?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was too. Um, they suggested it because that's what you gotta do, and I was like, yeah, let's do this for sure. Let's do all of the things. So, working on becoming a healthy human being.
Who's
That
going to
was
actually like eat?
right. Oh, and also I'm gonna
Yeah.
get a sleep exam as well because
Okay. Yep.
I'm always tired, no matter how much I sleep.
Do you have the apnea?
Maybe we'll find out.
Yeah, you'll
Might be the
find out.
apnea, might be something else.
Dude, it's
But
really, this is one of those really weird things. I actually haven't, I know I've talked about apnea and stuff. I actually haven't used my machine in like a month
why?
because I keep on, when I use it, I keep on waking up in the middle of the night. And then sometimes I can't fall back asleep because
Interesting.
it's weird. It's like you don't really feel the pressure, but I guess when you're asleep, your body is very sensitive to this or something like that. I don't know. So I haven't, I got to get back on it. The other reason was I hadn't cleaned it for a bit. And, uh,
Gross.
yes, exactly. And I don't want to get sick.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been, now that I'm on the meds for the ADHD, I've got, it's on my to task list to clean it so that I can actually start using it again. Because then I'll be like having superpowers,
Yay.
stimulants
Yeah.
plus a full rested sleep.
How horrifying.
I know.
Uh,
So, yeah, let's no transition. Let's just go to the Summa. The Summa Theologica was St. Thomas Aquinas' summary of theology, and the Summa Tweetologica is our summary of things we found interesting on Twitter. Okay, this one's going to be a fun one. I think. I hope. Let's have some fun.
we'll see.
It's been a serious day. um, this is from Yi
No.
at Can You Rest? Yes. Oh yes. I spoke to Dave Chappelle for 2 hours this morning. He is our modern day Socrates. So, okay. First, he uses. I'm a big advocate of two spaces after a period,
Uh huh.
but he used like four.
Yes. Yes, he did.
Yeah, it's okay. So Dave Chappelle, you know who Dave Chappelle is?
I do know who. I have seen many of his
Yeah.
specials. Yes.
So for those who do not know who Dave Chappelle is, he is a very affluent comedian, probably one of the best out there. Not recommended for young audiences, absolutely.
No.
Um, I and then Socrates. Well, we all know Socrates is a jerk,
He is a jerk.
right? In that he's always going around and getting people to realize they actually know nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure why Kanye's calling him a Socrates, but I think what he's trying to say that he's one of our modern figures of wisdom.
A bold claim.
It's a bold claim. However, my friend Father David from my diocese he loves comedians, and he's always brought this point to me that I think is actually quite important. He says comedians are in some ways like they can be kind of like prophets to a society because of the form of their entertainment. They're given a space to speak about things that most people aren't allowed to speak about, and they can point out hypocrisy, etc., to bring a laugh. And it's socially normative to allow for them to say this. And so, because of the keen sense of observance that a comedian has to have, they actually have to be very smart people, right? Like the greatest comedians are the ones who are able to really observe the absurdity of life. And so I think in this sense, I would actually agree with Kanye, because I do actually think Dave Chappelle is perhaps one of the best comedians out there. And I think and in that sense, he's definitely a figure of wisdom. No, I'm not saying this. I don't want people freaking out. I'm not saying this that I approve of every joke he says and stuff like that. That's not what I'm saying. But a lot of observations, and it's been a bit since I've seen, but like I'll be honest, like I was a big fan, again, not recommended for kids, but back in the day, I was a big fan of the Dave Chappelle show.
Well, who wasn't?
Because it was brilliant. And there were a lot of episodes that poked fun at like racial stereotypes and stuff like this, but it did it in a way that it poked fun at it, but it also criticized it. That's what a good philosopher should do. And so I don't know, I'm just kind of entertaining it, but I'm like, maybe Kanye's right.
Maybe Kanye's right. And maybe Kanye will be president. Who knows?
No politics.
I've really appreciated comedy and comedy specials, and I've watched a bunch of them. And one, because it's entertaining and it's fun, but they're also like interesting distillations of the zeitgeist of what's going on in culture, if they're good. Sometimes they are a reflection of what's going on in the culture. Like I've seen some like very postmodern stuff in comedy, which is very funny, but it doesn't say anything. It just deconstructs everything. It refuses to close the ironic distance, and
Right.
it's like, wow. And something about nihilistic comedy has always fascinated me, because it comes up really close. So like shows like Rick and Morty, or what's that one with the horse?
BoJack Horseman.
Yeah, and these other like nihilistic comedians, like it gets up really close to the reality of like the world without God and the world without meaning. It goes right up to the question, and it like goes all around the question, and it pokes at the question in all kinds of interesting ways, but then it flies back and just makes a joke about it.
So what you're saying is they are the Heideggers of comedy.
Yes. Rick and Morty is Heidegger of comedy. I don't know if I actually believe that, but it's too awesome of a take not to say. But like that aspect I found incredibly interesting as
absolutely.
a reflection on how human beings are trying to grapple with this, because you don't have really philosophers in a serious sense right now. At least not very many, but you do have these cultural entities, if you will. So I found that very interesting. The way that comedy has changed over time. And if you want, like, there's always a struggle for, like, how much should a priest be in the world and know the culture without being corrupted by it? And I think for anybody in ministry, what is the biggest comedy special that's out right now? I think that's a good way to kind of get into, like, what is going on in the zeitgeist without getting super involved in it, because it's not all good stuff. A lot of it's bad stuff. But to be aware of it, I think is a very important thing. So, in that certain sense, as a commentary on culture and thought and society, I do find it fascinating, as well as entertaining if they're actually good.
Okay, I'm gonna play off. So because I've been rewatching Rick and Morty right now. Again, not good for kids, but I watch it for the reasons you mentioned. I've always it's weird. I actually don't even find it that funny. At a lot of times, like it's smart, but it's not funny. Sometimes, like it's just because it's so depressing. It's like it is perhaps the most depressing show I've ever seen in my life. But that's what I find it interesting. The fact that, like, for me, the question is not what is good about this as an art form. It's why are people so interested in this? And again,
Yes.
I have rules and boundaries around what I will and will not watch. So Rick and Morty, it has foul language. I can
Yes.
deal with that. I never watched. I mean, okay, I know we're probably gonna start the debates around this again, but I never watched Game of Thrones because of the excessive stuff that was in it, right?
Yeah.
So you have, and I think as a priest, we follow our conscience with this one.
Yeah.
But Rick and Morty's been very. So I've been rewatching again because I just put a TV show on when I go to bed, so that's been the one I've been watching lately. And but it's so fascinating because it gets to the point of the question, and this is the thing I always find interesting about nihilistic comedy. It can never resolve the tension between meaninglessness and the desire for meaning,
Right.
right? And that's a big tension in Rick and Morty, I find.
Yeah.
And I think that's fascinating. And that people are finding this something that speaks to their heart should tell us something. This is why it's important. For us as priests, it tells us this is where the culture's heart is at. So
Hmm.
that's what we need to preach the gospel to.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where the formation comes for us.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Cool. What do you
This
got?
is a tweet from Riley, not producer Riley, Riley Cosgrove, and she says, "You guys, a research study found that people who are more morbidly minded and recognize mortality and their own deaths are more likely to be emotionally resilient during this pandemic. Catholic Memento Mori gang, rise up! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation point!" And this is something that, even apart from COVID, I have found that you will be more emotionally healthy as a human being if you meditate on your death in the light of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I've seen. I probably mentioned it before on the podcast, but something that struck me from when I was a seminarian, even doing what we call blessing services. It's just a funeral service outside of mass. A
Mm-hmm.
layperson can do it, uh, but and it I preface this by saying everyone handles grief differently.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is in different stages of their spiritual life. So I'm not saying people who do certain things in a certain way are bad people, but I do see certain unhealthy things where families want to have the quickest funeral service possible, that they don't want to enter into the suffering that they're already going to experience anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's not a slow there's not the there's no Holy Saturday for a lot
Right.
of people. There's no sitting in that awkward tension that something bad has happened because, hey, death is bad. Suffering is bad. Pain
Mm-hmm.
is bad. We know that Christ transforms it and brings good out of it and can even make it into something good. But you have to go through the cross to get to the resurrection. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, you're not going to get to the resurrection unless you go through the cross, you go through that awkward Holy Saturday, that waiting sort of thing. And so and this is something that you really get better at as a priest because you deal with people all the time. You can tell if people are processing things or if they're avoiding things.
Mm-hmm.
If and a lot of times that is a normal defense mechanism. It's what the psyche has to do because the psyche isn't prepared to deal with the enormity of what is going
Mm-hmm.
on, right? So it's not like something you can fix right away.
Mm-hmm.
But the Catholic who, in the light of the resurrection, in the light of God's whole plan for everything and the eschaton, it makes suffering easier. And one of the more frustrating things as a priest, and I think in a way that a lot of parishes have failed, is that we don't prepare people for death.
Mm-hmm.
And so when death strikes, they're destroyed. And you see
Mm-hmm.
this, and you hear stories about people who, like, a loved one dies, and or he dies in an incredibly tragic circumstance, and they leave the faith because of that. And like I said, I'm not judging that person because it's not necessarily their fault. They weren't taught and raised up in this. Uh, but the families that I've seen who enter deeply into the spiritual life, while the funeral and while the death of their loved one is still painful, is still sad, there's still all those very complex emotions, ranging from anger to sadness to numbness. Um, they're able to get through it in a much healthier way because ingrained in them is the truth of Jesus Christ. And it feels like so many people, they're not avoiding these funeral rites because they want to have a celebration of life. They're avoiding the funeral rites because they're afraid of their own death. And now that's nothing. I will never ever preach that at the funeral mass. Right? I'm
Mhm.
doing something different. I'm trying to bring
Mhm.
comfort to the family, trying to bring some
Mhm.
truth to them, the hope that is in Jesus Christ, and the funeral liturgy, the prayers. They're very hopeful, very very
Mhm.
hopeful. Right? But outside of those intense moments, I think we need to do a better job of preparing Christians for death.
Mhm.
And in a certain way, that's kind of what the faith is entirely about.
Yeah.
Like, why do we go to mass every Sunday? It's not because we like full pews. It's not because we need money in envelopes. It's so that when you come to God face to face, He's not going to be a stranger.
Mhm.
When you see God face to face, He's not going to be the same God you've been running away from your entire life. It's about forming a relationship with the one who loves you so that when He looks at you with all of His love, when you have passed on, that gaze of love is something that you embrace and don't
Right.
run away from, and that
Right.
will be heaven for you.
Yeah.
So yes, in a smaller sense, yeah, if you are more memento mori, remembering your death minded,
Mhm.
then stressful times like this, you can get through it in a more healthy way.
Mhm. I think especially when you're a priest, you're forced to become comfortable with death.
Yeah.
I even before I was a priest, I remember when I was spending time in the Missionaries of Charity, like when I was there for 4 months, we had 20 people die when I was there. I still remember, like, I think it was like day 2 I was there, and somebody was being transported to come to the hospice, and they actually died on the way. But because they are in transport, the sisters now had total care of the body. My first job was to clean a dead body.
That's intense.
2 days in, I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Right?
Yeah.
It is intense, right? And then, but by the end of it, like, I still remember, because like there was a cemetery in San Francisco that kind of gave them um, burial plots for free for the guys who they wouldn't have markers or anything, but they would have a place to be buried, full body. And every time, literally every time, especially when I put a body in a plot, the reminder always comes to me, that is going to be me one day.
Mm-hmm.
And that question and that about death and that reality is not meant to scare, it's meant to focus, to remove the extraneous stuff of life that interferes with your eternal destiny.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways, many times, a lot of, not universally obviously, but a lot of times, a lot of our struggles and faith and life, etc., comes from a lack of thinking truly about our death.
Yeah.
Because if we start to think about it, we have to start asking the question, what is there for me after this? And will my life have been made ready for this?
Yeah.
Right. And those are important questions to ask. So again, like, yeah, we as priests, when we're doing a burial, you're just reminded very
Mm-hmm.
easily in those moments.
And I
Yeah,
think
go ahead.
like our struggle is often on the other side of things, that you can kind of become numb to it, that you see it so often. So how do you enter into someone's suffering
Right.
without letting it destroy you, without becoming numb?
And yeah,
Doctors and nurses deal with this as well. I know
yeah,
Catholic doctors and nurses that, like, you have a job to do, you have things to do, but you're going to be surrounded by death and suffering.
yeah. And I mean, in a way, I think there has to be a certain distance on our part, because we have to be the person who leads the grieving family through the rites
Right.
and rituals of death. And so our job is to be the one who is composed and stuff like that. It is hard to show emotion sometimes. It is. It's and sometimes I think even for us as priests, we can seem not uncaring, but just like emotionless or numb to death. Not because we are numb to death, but sometimes, how do I want to put this? We have to learn how to control our reaction to certain deaths so that we can do what we need to do. Because it's not about me.
Right.
It's I carry an office to do a particular task in this moment. I know I've talked about it in the podcast before, but I still remember that that death I had of the teenage boy a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now. I was terrified the entire mass.
Yeah. Yeah.
I couldn't let that be shown because we had a church full of people there mourning tragedy. And so it was my job to lead them into hope somehow. And so I had to kind of ignore the terror.
And there's also something like that indulging in your emotion as a priest in that moment can be kind of a selfish thing to do
Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
right? Because uh, a lot of times you don't know this person like the family does.
Right.
And to pretend like you do, or to like uh, let yourself be awash in the atmosphere, would be a self-indulgent thing to do. It wouldn't be the sacrificial thing to do. Uh, and so figuring out a way to balance that as well is difficult. And also, since we have a little bit of time, I was actually very blessed growing up. My family has become much more Catholic as I have gone through seminary and become a
Mm-hmm.
priest. But growing up, they were like, kind of Catholic. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember funerals as a kid were always big events because of a big family. And during the visitation, by the way, remember when you could have visitations? Um, there would always be like a lot of laughter and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
sadness and storytelling, and that was a blessing I had growing
Mm-hmm.
up. But I remember, I don't know who had died, some member of my family, and me and the other kids were outside of the actual viewing room, and I kept like poking my head in to see what is going on there, right? And then the other adults kept pulling me away, like, no, 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 don't go in there, don't go in there, don't look, don't look. And then my dad was like, no, 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 no. My dad took me, and we went over to the body, and we knelt down, and I didn't pray because I didn't really know how to pray that much, but being there with my dad
Mm-hmm.
and seeing that he wasn't afraid, he was like, this is what you do. This
Mm-hmm.
is a holy moment. And I don't even think he would have had like the theology to talk about it, but something about that Catholicism was ingrained in him enough. Like, this is what you do. And having that experience as a young person, like that, really, it was a blessing that helped me understand that this is a sacred moment. This is an important moment, and it's a moment you shouldn't shrink from, as difficult as it may be. And I've always been thankful for that. That's been very helpful throughout my ministry and the rest of my life.
Cool. That's awesome. That's beautiful, actually. That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Great. Well, ready for some exhortations
Let's do it.
of the presbyteral sort?
Yes.
All right. It's time for
Only sort.
presbyteral exhortations. So this is one of these podcast episodes that's inspired by another podcast that I was listening to one day. I'm listening to more podcasts again now that I do more driving. Listen.
Which podcasts?
Not one with priests.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's better. No, okay, go ahead.
No, I was listening to Catching Foxes. I was catching up on some Catching Foxes episode the other day.
That's my commentary.
We're going on them tonight.
I know.
We love the guys. We love Luke and Gomer.
Absolutely.
They were talking. It was his episode about like everything's an emergency, and it got me reflecting a little bit around parish life because like the whole point of the episode was just to say that actually a lot of things are falling apart everywhere. Societies, families, like parishes, the church, a lot. We are going through a bit of a revolutionary moment, but it's one of those moments where it's like, there might be a tragedy just down the street, but you're making dinner type of thing, right?
Sure.
We often think that big revolutions mean a total societal collapse, but that's often not the case. You can't actually, because then you have to build literally everything from the ground up, and that's impossible infrastructurally wise. So, and I think he had a good point about this. So, but I want to focus in on that a bit because I think a lot of Catholics are feeling some despair around the future of the church in terms of numbers, priest vocations. We have worries about, will my kids practice the faith when they grow up? We have worries about the parish that we know and love. Will it be there in 10, 15, 20 years? And those are real concerns. And sometimes I think we as priests can be dismissive of it, not because we don't care, but we know sometimes we can't control any of that sometimes, right? Um, and so we just, it's like whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Like there's, if a parish has got to close, the parish has got to close. But I don't know. I find sometimes priests can have that attitude sometimes. But
Well,
yeah, okay,
so there's
okay, go ahead.
uh so my diocese is, in fact, I was just on a Presbyterian council meeting where we voted to combine a whole lot of churches, and combining a whole lot of churches and parishes means that a lot of parishes are. I voted to crush them. I
Hmm.
crush people's dreams with a vote.
Hmm.
It's not actually my decision to make; it's ultimately the bishop's decision to make. Uh, but I remember getting to my first assignment, and it was 3 parishes, 2 priests, 3 different parishes, and kind of being taken aback by how devoted people were to their parishes
Hmm.
for all kinds of reasons,
Yep.
and some more noble than others, but they were very devoted to their parishes. And realizing that that experience was completely foreign to me. Now,
Right.
it was foreign to me in the sense that I grew up in a suburban parish. It started off as an all purpose room, then we built a new church, but I was never super invested in my own parish growing up. And then I went to seminary, I was visiting churches all the time.
Hmm.
So being ingrained in the community is not an experience that I have.
Right. And I
I
would
think,
say that's similar for me too.
sure. But I think even if that was an experience that a priest had growing up, a lot of priests move so often, and change and drastic change is such an important part of their lives that they can be kind of numb to this experience of parishioners.
Hmm.
That, we look at them and they're like, it seems like their world is crumbling and we don't get it,
Hmm.
because we know their world isn't crumbling, but actually
Right.
it kind of is for them.
Right. Because
And this is a
we
deep
haven't been
dark
in that
secret.
parish for 50 years.
Right. And this is the deep dark secret that bothers me, because we say all of the time, the church is not a building, which is true, but the church building is not a building. It's a home for these people. That's what it is. So when you're destroying their buildings or telling them they can't go to mass there anymore, you're taking them away from their home. It may be completely and utterly necessary to do this,
Yeah.
but it doesn't take away that thing. So it
Right.
can be very difficult. So like it is my job as part of the former 7 parishes that are now 1 parish. It's part of my job to lead these people into a new future. So I have to do it, right?
Right.
That is my ministry. That's why I've been assigned here by the bishop. So I have to do it. And you can, if you just look at it on paper, it should be easy. But then you have to enter into all these people's lives, and that's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's a
And
necessary
then,
thing to do.
and it's hard to do too. It's hard to do too because, I get it. People want priests involved in their lives,
Yeah.
but we are so short on priests. The fact that people want priests at every little thing all the time, I'm sorry, those days are gone right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Just they're gone. I'm sorry. I wish I could say they aren't, because if a priest is at every little thing all the time, they're going to die of exhaustion. Right.
Yeah.
So, but this is what I want to focus on anyways, though. This is
Okay.
not what I want to focus on. I'm just saying, like, I recognize the stress that people feel, and listen, and those stresses are being amplified right now, right?
Because of everything.
Because of everything. Parish incomes are going down, all sorts of things. We have to, and so I've always been struck by some different documents the Vatican has put out, because I think there is a solution to go forward, but this requires approaching parish life in a new way, but not in like those formats of different programs that say how to revitalize your parish through flashy materials and big screens in your church and everything like that, modernizing the music. I don't actually think that has long-term value personally, because what it does, it actually still feeds on the old programs model of parish life. But if you read like certain church documents, so I'll give you one example. There's church documents on the use of churches for concerts.
Interesting.
Yeah, parishes for concerts. Yeah, and it's beautiful because in it actually strongly encourages churches to hold concerts. Why do you think that's the case?
Interesting. Well, I mean, on a certain practical level, churches back in the day were literally built for acoustics.
Mm-hmm.
So there's part of that. but also that the bringing together of community, the experiencing of anything that's true, good, and beautiful is good and leads us to God. Those are the thoughts off the top of my
Okay.
head.
It's an experience of culture,
Okay, yeah.
right? And now we're the church has guidelines of what kind of music you should have in your churches and stuff like that. It often ought to be, at least beautiful.
Yeah, what is it
Yeah.
those documents have to say about glow sticks? Like, can we have a church rave? I feel actually kind of bad saying that because some of our old church buildings have been turned into like
I
reception
know.
halls, and there's
I know.
literally raves in some of these
I
ancient
know.
church,
Thank
not
God.
ancient,
Thank
it's
God
America,
they're.
but
Thank God they're
ah,
deconsecrated. But yeah,
ah.
no. I mean, like there are guidelines around beauty, sacred music, and stuff like this. But they say the parish ought to be a place of culture, and that kind of phrasing has always stuck with me, and it's always been at my heart as a desire for a parish. But I don't know why it's not until now that it's starting to really like come to the fore for me as like a pastoral plan in a way. And I think the way, you see, we have to start thinking not in a 5-year term. We have to start thinking, and we have to start past like quote unquote pastoral planning in terms of generations.
Interesting.
We have to start playing a longer game, because the church as a leaven is in the business of building civilization,
Sure.
because civilization is the place where people live, and so the church wants to be a leaven to that. Civilization is going through some major crises right now, and the church has the possibility to become a place where life is lived. So why am I saying this? So there's a few reasons. First is because like one of the problems you hear all the time, and we still hear it, and I'm scratching my head that I'm starting to still even hear it from people who are more our age. Um, my kids don't want to go to church anymore, but they went through their catechism programs and stuff like this, and I'm like, okay, great. What was your life of prayer at home? And I just get the blank stares. Right? Oh, we went to church on Sundays. Okay, great. They went to Catholic school. Okay, great. But what did you do to live the life of faith at home?
Mm-hmm.
And then did you integrate yourself into the life of the parish? What do you mean? It's like they did. Oh, you mean like I went to a Knights of Columbus breakfast once, I guess. Well, yeah. You see, so I'm like, you see, that's why your kids aren't practicing the faith. You see, I think a lot of times, for example, kids don't practice the faith after they've been through a catechism program or whatever. The catechism program could be the best in the world, right? The best in the world. But they're going to internalize what they've learned when they see that what they've learned actually leads to a flourishing way of life. So by this, I mean that you're having maybe a family group every Sunday after mass in the church hall. Not right now, obviously, but you're whereby you have kids running around and stuff like this, and they have you see, it's not just about information, it's also like Newman's illative sense, right? This idea that you learn just by osmosis, and you start to see this as a way of life. And so I think parishes need to becoming more centers of life again. This is harder because we're not as geographically centralized as we once were, and it means some sacrifice on the part of the laity as well, in terms of saying no to certain programs and stuff out there so that they can actually start making the church as a place of and a way of life. But I think if we start treating the parish as a place of culture again, as a place of encounter and life, I actually think we could see some really positive turnaround. Thoughts before you maybe go into practicalities?
Yeah. I think the problem is parishes have formed generations of Catholics in the exact opposite.
Yes.
So like so when we say like, oh, like this is something that this should happen with the laity, I think we need to also say that it's parish's fault that this is the attitude of the laity.
Right.
Like, how many parishes have any kind of young adult or adult faith formation or events? Like, a lot of times, like for years and years, it's been you catechize the kids and then they're done, and
Mm-hmm.
that's been sending a message.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have what are the events at the parish? There's mass, and then maybe nothing else. Maybe there's like a sewing group or whatever, or maybe there's lots of events, but they're and I'm sure a lot of people enjoy them, but a lot of them are just bad.
Mm-hmm.
They're bad.
Hmm.
They are just lame. This is why young adults, like, when they see a parish event, they're thinking of gyms and folding chairs.
Right.
Um, this is also
I'm definitely thinking out loud on this one, but it's been a thought. It's been a brainworm of mine for
sure,
a couple of
sure, and
weeks.
I don't disagree with it, and I think it takes a lot of courage to totally rethink a parish, but I think it's also, if we want to do this, that's going to have to take up a majority of your time and effort
Hmm.
as a priest.
Hmm.
Like, even the idea of, okay, like having a concert, and this is also a weird cultural thing. Like, the idea of having, Mozart played at your church.
Hmm.
That's not the same as Mozart being played in the 19, 18, 1700s. I don't know when Mozart wrote music, but whatever.
Yeah.
But like,
Yeah.
because it's so that is a different kind of cultural experience,
Hmm.
because like, or it's just the whole difficulty with the great unstoppable trending, the desire for more traditional things in the church. There's always, for us, going to be an aspect of artificiality because it's not ours right now.
Right. But that's my thing. I'm thinking we to support the trading, it needs to become ours.
Yes. Okay. But I'm not disagreeing. But I'm thinking about how every enthusiastic young seminarian, they
Right.
read some sort of article or see something on beauty, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, beauty will save
Or
the world.
or they
And
read
what does
Spirit of
that
the
mean?
Liturgy.
Let's all learn how to smoke pipes. Um,
Right.
and
No,
like,
no. I know that it has to be. So this is kind of getting now to like, okay, nuts and bolts about this, because I think it.
by the
I
way, I
think.
was I was that seminarian, so I'm owning
Yeah. Yeah.
myself.
Okay.
But before you get into
Yeah.
just to finish the thought, um, it's I think we just have to be very humble about this project.
Yes. Absolutely. No. 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 Absolutely.
Yeah.
And realistic about what your parish can and can't do, right? And what it can and can't support. I think in this regard, this is where involving the laity will actually be of great help, because it's going to be their job to I guess I have some dreams of things I might be able to do in my parish one day, that I would really like to do, and I think I actually have a space and the people to do it, which is really exciting. Um, it's we need to I mean, part of it is we've been screaming over and over again, the current model doesn't work because it's the old model, and it's not wrong. But it means, like, I think it means a few things. So I think first and foremost, it means formation by the priest through homilies. Almost like just beating over the head in the sense of like being repetitious in multiple homilies of what is the church and what is the nature and mission of a parish. And just saying it over and over and over again until they're sick and tired of it. That's one space. And behind all this, by the way, fasting and prayer. Like that for me is like almost like I don't even need to say it because I just think it's just presumed. Okay. But if a parish becomes a place of culture, it becomes something alive. And when something is alive, it's attractive. Right? That's the key. Um, I think a lot of times our parishes aren't attractive. Not all of them, but because they're dead.
Yeah.
Right? Not in terms of like they're not literally dead, but I mean like they're
Yeah.
just kind of just
And
doing
not
the bare
saying like
minimum
there
again.
are earnest and holy people there, and it's not discounting any of that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, okay. So what is this going to start looking like? How do they, because I think if we can start, if a parish is, and like, this is the thing, this doesn't just depend on the priest. And this is why I'm saying it here, because like, okay, this obviously our experience is more priestly, but this is stuff that I think the laity can do legitimately. And I also think um, there is a point to expanding upon the idea that the parish is not just the building. And so when I say the parish is a place of culture, I mean the whole body of these people is the culture. It's a way of life whereby they're all out at McDonald's one Sunday after mass having McDonald's breakfast, and everyone sees the joy and happiness around these families and the life that is being brought about this. And it might start posing a question. I've seen this happen sometimes where people will go up to some families and say, "Why are you so happy?" And they'll just say, "Well, oh, we just got back from church." So that's what I'm saying. Like we become a sign already just by the fact that we are living a life. Okay, so my focus is more, um, I think, doing things like concerts, but not just putting on a concert. But it's something that the parish, in terms of its actual parishioners, show up for. But that's a nice, easy middle ground to invite people to. It's not mass. It's an easy invite. It becomes something evangelizing. Whereby the priest, listen, it doesn't have to be your choir. It can be, you can bring in an outside group, but the priest is going to insist that if you're going to rent our space, we're going to say a prayer to open and close the concert. And the priest is around, and the people are around, inviting, talking, mingling in this life, where it becomes a place of education, not just in terms of CCD, but adult education, and not just adult education for your parishioners, but having topics that might appeal to people outside your normal reach, right? So like having a lecture maybe on, hey, what's a Christian's understanding of Nietzsche? Right?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Or hey, what's good about Nietzsche? Maybe is a bit, wait, they're going to talk about that at a Catholic
clickbait.
church?
That's the
Yeah,
clickbait
exactly.
right
It's a bit of
there,
clickbait. I mean, like, I'm just something, and then you have like, I think I've talked about my ideas around baptism prep and stuff like this, but because like, here's the thing. The reason, why am I saying all this? What is the number one reason people aren't going to church who are Catholics?
Because it doesn't affect their lives.
And yes. And I would add one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know anyone. They feel alone when they go in. And so
yeah.
that's a big hindrance for a lot of people. They don't make that step forward, not because they're not interested, but it's because they literally don't know anyone.
Yeah.
And that's a massive barrier that needs to be overcome. Mm-hmm. So you create spaces where it's easy for people to encounter each other through life-giving efforts, through making our programs more focused around building life and less around having to do a program X, Y, and Z. I think when we start to do stuff like this, the parish becomes vibrant, alive. And this is the other thing. It also needs to be done by, I think this is work for the priests. They need to do it in such a way that this continues whether or not they're there. So it doesn't become surrounded around the personality of the priest, because that's always a big problem. Your pastor leaves, he gets moved to another place, and then it all falls apart because he hasn't built up the laity in such a way to actually build this. But like, so because like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, when parish culture actually comes to become life-giving, it builds up the local people, but then it spills over to becoming evangelizing. And that's when we're going to do our best work. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling a bit, but
no, I think you're making some sense. But let's throw in a hot take.
Okay.
You said, we're talking about this obviously because we have more lay people listening to our podcast than priests, obviously, right?
Right.
But here's the thing. Here's my hot take. This is completely dependent on the priest.
Okay.
And it's completely dependent on the priest because Father can decide to unleash the laity or to crush them.
Mm-hmm.
And like so for example, I met with a group of ladies who wanted to do a lot of stuff for young families. They wanted to do events that were kind of fun. So like you can throw all your kids in a room and have them run around. The adults can hang out and that sort of thing. They did some of those events and it was great. A lot of parents showed up. It was wonderful. But then they wanted to do something like a rosary march or a Eucharistic procession.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we were just getting involved in that, and then the COVID happened. Well, a few weeks ago, my pastor was like, hey, this has been brought to my attention. Let's do it. And he unleashed the laity. And it was beautiful and it was organized. We had, because we did, and, our parish staff did some coordination here and there, and did some of the heavy lifting as far as getting permission from the county and blah, 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 blah. But like, the Blue Army showed up with their statue, right? Our teens showed up to hold candles. We had people volunteering and bringing giant rosaries that they had in their home, right?
Yeah.
The lady were unleashed and were able to do this thing.
Yeah.
Or now we're going to do a kind of weekly thing where there'll be some parishioner who will read the gospel and have like 3 reflection questions. So it'll be on
Hmm.
a YouTube format, it'll be on a podcast format.
Yep.
So they'll do that. But on top of that, there will be a chance for people to gather and talk about this sort of thing, too, right? And this is an idea that completely came from our parishioners.
Hmm.
And I've seen there is a lot of energy bubbling under the surface of a lot of parishes. But if you have a pastor who's afraid of change or afraid that if something goes wrong, it's going to hurt my image, which is going to hurt the
Hmm.
image of the parish, if you have someone at the top who isn't allowing these things to happen, I would even say that dad also has to encourage it,
Hmm.
right? Because if dad's not encouraging it, then the rest of the kids are gonna be like, "Oh, I guess what we're doing is bad or wrong,"
Right.
or he's allowing it to happen, but he doesn't care, right?
Right.
Um, so it's gonna so obviously the the summation of the hot take is it's not all about the priest, but I really do think
Right.
like if the pastor isn't willing to do this stuff, then it's not like the parish is hopeless because
Right.
hey, you can still meet at each other's houses. Hey,
Exactly.
you can still do things, but that's not the ideal. And
Right.
nor am I saying that everything absolutely has to be done in a church hall.
Right.
I think more things shouldn't be done. But there's something about having the spiritual thumbs up and encouragement from the man you call father that allows these things to flourish.
Yes. And so, I mean, like, I agree with you there. It's the priest needs, um, the priest needs to be spearheading it in a way, but he should make it to the point where the day comes where if he leaves, the new guy comes in, nothing's
There's so much inertia that
exactly right. And I think that's more what I meant by that. Because no,
sure,
I
sure.
agree. Initially, oh no, absolutely. Initially, it needs to, and I just in some ways I still feel like if we could get past the polemics and actually do stuff like listen to what the Second Vatican Council actually says around the laity and what is the nature and mission of the church, I think we can find in this a lot of richness that can inform, and promote our life as Catholics. Because this is actually what the council's trying to do, is trying to rebuild culture from within. But recognizing, but I think I do like there are places of hope for this. So I think there are also some tactical choices to make. So I'll give. I mean, and again, when I'm saying making these tactical choices, I don't mean we're going to ignore everyone all the time, but I do think there are places where more emphasis can be placed because there's more energy to say yes to this kind of stuff. And I don't know about you, but my experience is that any Catholic I've met who's under 40 is Catholic by choice and by intention. Now, that might be my Canadian experience here.
I yes and no. Like
Okay.
certainly I've met a
Okay.
lot of young fervent
Right.
Catholics. But I also, do marriage prep for young people who were shocked when they found out that they have to go to mass every Sunday.
Yeah,
So,
but well, that's my thing. But no, I'm talking about people who are like intention, like they're going to mass every Sunday. That's what I'm sorry. That's what I mean. I mean, like
yeah.
the active Catholics under 40, if they're going to mass every Sunday, they go to confession once a month. They're not doing this generally because this is just what you do. There is an intentionality behind it that wasn't there before, that isn't there in others sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of places. I
Okay.
think in some like in my area, while there's certainly people like that, that's absolutely true for. There's still enough cultural oomph in my area
Right.
where you may have not saying anything bad about their intentions,
Right.
but and it's not like they're trying to just go through the motions, but their understanding of Catholicism
Right.
is going through the motions. They want
Okay.
to be Catholic,
That's
they want to be
interesting.
holy,
Right.
and their understanding of how to do that is to go through the motions.
Right. I guess for me, my experience generally is that if you have a family and you're going to mass every Sunday, it's very rare that they just do this out of habit.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, the majority of the culture in the
Right.
West that if you're going to do this, it's taking a lot of effort. You
Yeah.
can't, it's
Okay.
swimming
Yeah.
upstream.
But those are your foundation stones.
Yeah.
Because they want stuff like this for a few reasons. A, cheap entertainment. Hey, we're gonna have a potluck on Sunday, right? That's an easy thing for me to show up. My kids can run around without any worry. Parents can socialize with each other. The teenagers can hang out with each other. Like, and part of this too is I love what happened with your procession there because it was integrated as well. So like while I think a lot of focus has to go with these young families for a variety of reasons. And I'm not saying we're ignoring everyone else. I'm just saying you put a lot of energy into them so that they can build up the foundation so that everyone else can join in. But that it moves towards this idea whereby everyone shares a life with each other. And I think for it to become culture, it needs to be saying we recognize there are distinct groups, but these distinct groups don't exist for their own sake, but for the service of the whole body of the parish, so that they become integrated with it. So that you have 8-year-olds who see the 75-year-old retiree who only there on Sunday coffee loves to see them because they're sharing a life together. I guess this is my main point: is that a parish needs to become a place of shared life.
Yeah.
If you want the idea of instituting more programs again, we need to start making decisions around stuff that's shared life. And but what I'm trying to say though too is that while it does require the pastor to spearhead, it doesn't always have to happen that way. I know of a friend who hosts a young adult group at her house, and they have 20 to 30 young adults every week or every time they have their sessions. And these are people from different parishes even. Mm-hmm. That's a great thing. And that's a work of the parish that doesn't need to focus in on the structures of the parish. That's good stuff. And that's where we need to start thinking outside the box. What can I do to reach out to those people who I think are like-minded, who want to share energy, who see Christianity as a way of life and as a choice that I make day in, day out, and to build life up with each other. And then pastors and priests to also start making decisions around this way. It's hard. It's really hard because it really means gutting a lot of stuff. It means making liturgy not into a gimmick, but into the worship of the Father. It means offering opportunities for encounter with those beyond the parish walls. It means fostering friendship and communion amongst people. In some ways, like there's always the jokes that priests play matchmakers, right? But in this sense, actually, I think this is where a priest should say, I'm going to be a matchmaker of friendship, right? Like I'm going to create spaces where I know these people will get along. I just need an opportunity for them to encounter each other. And then that starts to build life and friendship. And then they start seeing each other at church. And then they start, it's not hard. Like I know I've talked about my young adult group before, what I did in Victoria, but it was really not hard. It was simple. We had a meal, we had a talk, we had prayer. And so many of the people who went to that are still friends today.
Yeah.
And they've started their own Bible study groups and stuff like that. And that's great. And that's the whole idea. It just naturally flows. We don't need to be so programmatic about it anymore. We just need to create opportunities of encounter between people, and we need spaces for that. This is one thing Brandon brought up in his book, right? About like those, what were they called? Like those third spaces or something like that. And that how those are disappearing more and more. He made the point that really a parish should try and come into that again. And he's right. And I say all this with the caveat. It's not just about building community for community's sake. It's about building communion. You see, the distinction is community is just like, hey, it's just friendship just so I can have some company. At least that's how I think often we kind of see it. But when you build up communion, you're sharing a way of life. You're sharing a way of faith. And you're sharing a view of the world together. And you're willing to suffer with each other with it. You're willing to celebrate with each other with it, etc. Sorry, I rambled on a lot there.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I think also another difficulty, another a blessing. In some areas, you're going to have to rediscover what culture is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about like super safe Starbucks suburbia,
Mm-hmm.
where there isn't
exactly
a culture. Everything is so atomized.
Yeah.
And everything is so based on the consumer as an atomized consumer that there's nothing there. And also, I think it's very important that like in a lot of places in the church in America, we do have groups of people who have a lot of culture that's authentic to their family.
Mm-hmm.
They just might not look like the rest of our parishioners as well. And how to reach out to them and to ask them to share their life with us as well. And even what you said about going outside, this might be a tangent, but just been it bothering me, so I'm just going to mention it. I was in a meeting and we were talking about these different areas in the diocese and blah 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 blah. And they talked about this one area in the diocese that it's really growing, so it's a great opportunity for evangelization, there because just the area is growing. And I'm thinking to myself, even in my own area, like we have enough people in my county to fill all 7 of our church buildings.
Hmm. Yep,
Are we
exactly.
saying that this area has a lot of people that look like us, so we'll be comfortable evangelizing to
Exactly.
them? A
Yeah.
little bit awkward,
Yeah.
like we weren't saying it out loud.
Yeah.
And like I'm not an expert in these things. I am
Yeah.
as milquetoast suburbia as you can get. Don't let
Yeah.
this Italian facade, fool you. But really, I guess the point to tie this in is to be willing to take risks, to mess up a
Yes.
little bit,
Yeah.
and not to be perfect in it. But it's a changing of the priorities of the parish.
Right. And maybe I'll say this to conclude. And this is where, okay, speaking about evangelization,
Mm.
it's something we all need to do as parishioners, but it's not hard. I think we overtalk it. I think we
I don't
overthink it.
know. There's a whole podcast out there that tells us how to do it. And if it wasn't for if it was easy, you wouldn't need an entire podcast to teach
But it
people how
is
to do it.
easy. Build relations, build friendship, show a way of life that attracts. And
Now nobody
it,
has to listen to Every Knee Shall Bow ever again. Take that.
Take that. No, but I mean, listen, I'm not. I guess it. We need to actually just be comfortable. Because here's the thing: I think the reason we're actually not willing to evangelize is because we don't think we have something good to invite people to.
Mm-hmm.
So let's give them something life-giving to invite them to, and it will become easier to evangelize. Because you can just say, "Hey, my parish is having this Oktoberfest, and I want you to be there." That's easy. That's part of evangelizing, right? It is. It really is. Or hey, we're having a massive celebration for the Feast of St. Thomas with the Indian community. It's going to be Indian food and all sorts of things. You should come. I may have shared this before on the podcast, but I'll share it again because I think this kind of ties up a lot what I'm saying and shows a way forward. When I was a seminarian in Courtney, I was working with the young adult or the teens actually who were wanted to go to World Youth Day. They want to do some fundraising for this, obviously, because it's not cheap to go to World Youth Day. We're going to Madrid, Spain. So I said, okay, I'm going to pitch you guys a swing dance fundraiser because I love swing dancing and I know how to run those events, right?
Sure, yeah.
So I said, we're going to sell 400 tickets at $25 a piece. And the teenagers looked at me with fear in their eyes. And I said, don't worry, I will sell half the tickets. You guys only have to sell half of them. And I said, and this is how you're going to pitch it. What do you pay for a movie? Popcorn and a pop. And they'll say 25 to $30. And then I'll say, and that's what you're paying for this. So it's no different. Tell it to your friends. Sell it. And they did. We sold out 400 people. We raised $11,000 after costs with one night. That's pretty good. But I had someone come up to me that night. The place is packed. He goes, "Are you the guy who organized this?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I just need to talk to you." He said, "You have Vietnamese here. You have people from Africa, North America, Philippines." Like he goes, every culture of the world is here, and they're all sharing life together. Like you're all just having fun.
It's sad it had to be swing dancing, but hey.
Anyways, and what he said to me?
What?
He said, "I think I need to become Catholic because I want this. I want this." I was like, yes, but that's the thing. You create an event, an experience of encounter and friendship and life, and people will want in. So that's all you have to do. And that's what I'm inviting priests who listen, laity who listen, to find ways. I recognize right now with COVID, this might be more difficult, but start planning now for the day those doors open to go out on fire to build a culture in your parish whereby people will want to come to live.
I think what that story of that swing dancing event really teaches us is that truly Jesus Christ is Lord of the dance.
How dare you? Thanks for listening. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you can find podcasts, we are there. You can email us, clericallyspeaking@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook and now on YouTube too. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on the YouTubes. You can find me on Twitter at FR Harrison.
You can find me forever making fun of swing dancing.
Not in a doctor's office. Okay.
That was the easy one.
Yeah, that was the easy one. You can find the podcast at Clerical Pod, and we will see you all next week. God bless.
Peace. Also, don't find me in the hospital or the doctor's office. That would break all kinds of HIPAA laws. You can't do that. Shame on you.